Close your eyes, take a deep, slow breath, and step through the veil of 25 centuries. Imagine, for a moment, that the modern world has quietly dissolved around you. The distant rumble of engines, the glow of electronic screens, and the urgent tick of contemporary time all fade into complete silence. In their place, a soft Mediterranean wind sweeps across a dusty, sun-drenched plain, bordered by jagged blue mountains and a shimmering indigo sea. You're standing on a winding path cut through a grove of ancient silvery olive trees. The year is 432 BC, near the twilight of the golden age of Pericles. You're about to step into classical Athens, not as a tourist staring at cold marble ruins, but as a living, breathing participant in the greatest, most vibrant and most paradoxical city of the ancient world. Before you stands a city of brilliant contrast. It is a world of breathtaking philosophical soaring and harsh physical reality. A place where democracy was born in dusty open-air assemblies, yet built upon the unseen labour of enslaved people and the quiet, sequestered lives of women. A city where grand temples of radiant white marble towered above narrow, unpaved streets, smelling of wood smoke, roasting garlic, and dried fish. Feel the warm, dry air against your skin. Smell the crisp scent of wild thyme crushing beneath your sandals. Listen to the faint, melodic chiming of bronze goat bells echoing down from the rocky slopes of Mount Hymettus. This is your morning. This is your home. This is life in ancient Athens. The transition from night to morning in 5th century Athens is soft and deliberate. You awaken inside your oikos, the Athenian home. There are no loud alarms, no chiming clocks, only the gradual shift of light filtering through the central courtyard. Your eyes open to the sight of rough, whitewashed mud brick walls. The air inside the room is cool, preserved by the thick clay construction that keeps out the blistering heat of the Attican summer. You lie upon a simple wooden frame strung with leather thongs, topped with a mattress stuffed with dried wool or sweet-smelling straw. Over you rests a mantle of woven wool, a hymation, which served as your blanket through the cool night air and will soon become your outer cloak for the day ahead. Rise slowly. Your bare feet touch the floor, which consists not of wood or smooth tiles, but of hard-packed earth mixed with small river pebbles, polished smooth by generations of walking. The house is quiet, structured entirely around a central open-air courtyard. This courtyard is the heart of the Athenian home. It is the only real source of light and fresh air, as Athenian houses have almost no outer windows facing the narrow public street, partly for security against thieves, and partly to keep out the dust and noise of the city. In the corner of the courtyard stands a small altar dedicated to Zeus Herkaios, the protector of the household enclosure. Beside it, a shallow stone basin holds fresh rainwater collected from the tilted roof. You step out into the courtyard. The sky above is a pale, pearlescent blue, tinged with the golden hues of dawn. You dip your hands into the cool water of the basin, splashing your face to wake your senses. You wash away the residue of sleep using a small lump of clay like Fuller's earth or ash, as soap in the modern sense does not yet exist. A few drops of olive oil rubbed into your hands and face restore moisture to skin constantly exposed to the dry Mediterranean climate. From the domestic wing of the house, the gyneceum, the private quarters reserved strictly for the women of the family, you hear the low, rhythmic hum of a wooden loom. Even before the sun fully clears the horizon, the women and domestic servants are already at work, spinning raw sheep's wool into thread, preparing the textiles that clothe the entire family. In Athens, a household's wealth and virtue are reflected directly in the quality of its weaving. The clacking of the loom's clay loom weights against one another forms the eternal background music of the Greek domestic morning. Your breakfast is simple, humble, and unhurried. You sit upon a low wooden stool, while a servant or family member brings you a small terracotta bowl. Breakfast in Athens is not a heavy meal. It consists of akratisma, hard barley bread baked the evening before, dipped directly into unmixed wine diluted slightly with water, or accompanied by a few dark salt-cured olives and a small wedge of salty goat's cheese. You break a piece of the coarse barley bread with your fingers. The crust is thick and hearty, smelling rich and earthy of the countryside. You dip it into the bowl of dark, fragrant wine, letting the bread soften before taking a bite. The flavour is robust, the tartness of the wine balancing the salty, savoury notes of the cheese and olives. This simple fuel has sustained farmers, philosophers, soldiers, and sculptors for centuries. Now, you dress for the day. Clothing in classical Athens is an exercise in elegant simplicity. There are no tailored buttons, zippers, or complex seams. You don a chiton, a simple tunic made from a single rectangular piece of lightweight linen or fine wool, wrapped around the body and pinned at the shoulders with bronze or silver brooches, fibulae. It falls to just around your knees, bound at the waist with a thin leather belt. Over this, if the morning air retains a cool breeze, you drape your woolen himation, wrapping it loosely over one shoulder and leaving your right arm free. On your feet, you tie simple sandals made of tanned ox hide, secured around your ankles with leather thongs. You step toward the heavy wooden door that leads from your private domestic sanctuary to the public world outside. As you slide back the bronze bolt, you enter the bustling, chaotic, and intellectually electric atmosphere of the city. As you step out into the street, the contrast is immediate and striking. The calm, orderly privacy of your courtyard vanishes, replaced by a sensory explosion of sound, movement, and scent. The streets of Athens are not the wide, grand, marble-paved avenues often depicted in modern imagination. Except for a few major ceremonial routes, Athenian streets are narrow, winding, unpaved alleyways, barely wide enough for two pack mules to pass each other without brushing flanks. The morning sun cast long, dramatic shadows against the mud brick walls of the houses lining the alley. Because the city grew organically over centuries without a master urban plan, these streets twist and turn in an intricate labyrinth. The ground beneath your sandals is dry, powdery earth, mixed with limestone dust and the occasional puddle from discarded household water. In Athens, there is no municipal sewage system. Householders simply throw wastewater out into the street with a brief vocal warning to passers-by. Walk forward, navigating the subtle rhythm of the morning traffic. Around you, the human diversity of 5th century Athens reveals itself in every step. You pass an elderly citizen walking slowly, leaning on a polished knotty olive-wood staff, his long beard silvered by age. Beside him walks a young boy, a paidagogos, a trusted family slave, carrying the boy's wax writing tablets and a wooden lyre on their way to school. A peasant from the surrounding hills of Attica pushes a stubborn donkey laden with woven baskets overflowing with fresh figs, leeks, wild herbs, and clay amphorae of goat's milk. The air smells rich and complex, a mingling of baking bread from neighbourhood hearths, wood smoke, donkey manure, the salty tang of the sea carried on the wind from the port of Piraeus 5 miles away, and the subtle, everywhere present aroma of crushing olives and fragrant pine resin. As you walk, look closely at the walls of the houses. Small niches carved into the mud brick hold terracotta figurines of household gods. Hermes, the protector of travellers, or Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. Freshly cut olive branches or woven garlands of wool hang above several doorways, signalling the recent birth of a child or a family blessing. The sounds of the city build like a crescendo. In the distance you hear the metallic, rhythmic clinking of a blacksmith's hammer striking an iron blade against an anvil. From a nearby stonecutter's yard comes the sharp scritch-scratch of chisels carving soft limestone. Dogs bark from rooftops and women call out to one another from high inner courtyard windows. You turn a sharp corner where the narrow alley opens up significantly. The air grows clearer, the light expands, and suddenly, rising dramatically into the brilliant blue sky above the rooftops, you catch your first breathtaking view of the Acropolis. The sacred rock dominates the city like a monument carved by the gods themselves. Even from below, the sheer scale of the engineering boggles the mind. High upon the limestone cliff, bathed in the blinding golden sunlight of morning, sits the newly constructed Parthenon. Its pure white pentelic marble glowing so brightly against the deep sky that it almost hurts your eyes to look directly at it. The marble contains trace amounts of iron, which, under the intense Attican sun, gives the vast temple a warm golden honey-like radiance. You can faintly see the brilliant blues, reds and gold leaf paint decorating the intricate friezes depicting the great procession of the Panathenaic festival. High above the pediment stands the colossal bronze statue of Athena Promachos, Athena the Defender, crafted by the legendary sculptor Phidias. Her golden spear tip catches the morning light, gleaming like a star visible to sailors miles out at sea as they navigate toward the harbour of Piraeus. To be an Athenian walking beneath this shadow is to feel both immensely small and profoundly proud. The Acropolis is not merely a temple complex, it is the physical manifestation of Athenian ambition, power and devotion. You take a deep breath, adjust the drape of your woolen cloak, and follow the flow of pedestrian traffic down the gentle slope of the Panathenaic Way, heading straight into the beating heart of Athenian public life, the Agora. If the Acropolis is the soul of Athens, the Agora is its beating heart, its brain and its stomach all at once. As you step into this vast, open square covering several acres at the foot of the Acropolis, the sound of the city hits you like a physical wave. The Agora is not just a marketplace. It is a grand, chaotic melting pot where politics, commerce, philosophy, gossip and religion collide every single day. Imagine standing at the edge of the square, taking in the scene. Thousands of people fill the space. Under the shade of long, covered marble colonnades known as stoas, groups of men gather in heated conversation. In the open centre of the market, temporary wooden stalls with woven reed awnings are packed tightly together, organised into strict zones known as circles. Here is the section for fishmongers, where silvery sea bream, sardines and coveted octopus from the Aegean lie, displayed on cold marble slabs, kept fresh with mountain snow brought down from Mount Parnes. Over there is the garlic and onion market, filling the immediate air with its sharp, pungent aroma. Further along are the sellers of perfume, oil, pottery, charcoal, cooked lentils, and fresh flower garlands woven from violet and myrtle. Listen to the cacophony of voices calling out in various dialects of Greek. Fresh figs from Attica, sweeter than honey from Hymettus, fine olive oil cold-pressed from the first harvest, sardines from Phaleron caught at dawn. Among the market stalls you see all tiers of Athenian society moving side by side. Citizens dressed in clean white tunics rub shoulders with resident foreigners, known as metics, who wear darker, functional garments and drive much of the city's commercial engine. Enslaved people, identifiable sometimes by their close-cropped hair or distinct foreign dress from Thrace, Scythia or Caria, weave through the crowds carrying heavy clay jars, baskets of grain, or woven sacks of charcoal for their masters' households. You stroll toward the Stoa Poikile, the painted stoa. This magnificent open-air porch features grand Doric columns supporting a roof that provides welcome shade from the intensifying sun. Inside, the back wall is covered with massive, brilliant panel paintings by the famous artist Polygnotus, depicting legendary battles, the mythic fall of Troy, the defeat of the Amazons, and the legendary victory of the Athenians over the Persians at Marathon just a generation prior. Here, under the shade of these brilliant paintings, you find the intellectual pulse of the world. In one corner, a circle of young men wearing elegant cloaks stands spellbound around a strangely looking man with a broad flat nose, bulging eyes and a prominent belly. He wears a simple threadbare tunic and goes entirely barefoot despite the rough stone floor. It is Socrates. He's not writing books or delivering grand speeches. Instead, he is engaged in his endless, relentless quest for truth through conversation. You stop and listen as his clear, resonant and mildly ironic voice carries over the gentle murmur of the marketplace. He's questioning a self-assured young aristocrat about the true nature of justice. "Tell me, my friend," Socrates asks with a gentle smile, "can a man be considered just if he does good only out of fear of punishment, or must justice be desired for its own sake?" The young man hesitates, shifting his weight from foot to foot, realizing that his confident assumptions are unraveling with every precise question Socrates asks. Surrounding spectators chuckle softly, enjoying the intellectual duel. This is the birthplace of Western philosophy, occurring not in quiet university halls, but right here on the dusty pavement of the daily market. A short distance away, near the grand administrative buildings at the western edge of the agora, stands a large round building with a conical roof, the Tholos. This is the operational centre of Athenian government. Inside, 50 members of the Prytanes, the executive committee of the Council of 500, are on duty 24 hours a day, serving their month-long rotation. They sleep in the building and are fed at public expense, ensuring that there is always an official government authority present to respond to emergency messages or sudden crises. Nearby stands the Bouleuterion, the council house, where 500 citizens chosen by lot gather to draft laws and prepare the agenda for the full assembly. You walk toward a curious monument near the centre of the agora, the monument to the eponymous heroes. Here stand 10 bronze statues representing the mythical founders of the 10 tribes of Athens. Around the stone base of the monument, wood panels painted with white plaster serve as the city's public bulletin board. A dense crowd of citizens has gathered to read the latest notices scribbled in black ink. One notice announces an upcoming meeting of the Ecclesia, the People's Assembly, on the Nix Hill to debate Navy funding. Another lists upcoming military draft rosters for hoplite infantry soldiers. A third panel posts public court summons for an upcoming trial regarding land boundaries. As you stand among your fellow Athenians, feeling the dry heat of mid-morning settling over the square, you realise the fundamental truth of this city. In Athens, life is lived entirely in public. There is no boundary between the private citizen and the state. To be an Athenian man is to be a politician, a judge, a soldier, a philosopher, and a market-goer all at once. The home is merely a place to sleep and store possessions. The city itself is the living room. While the marble temples and philosophical debates capture the imagination, daily life in ancient Athens is grounded in the hard physical realities of survival in an arid, resource-scarce environment. By late morning, the sun shines brightly, reflecting off the limestone cliffs and light mud brick walls. The temperature rises, and thirst becomes a constant presence. Water is the gold of Athens. The local rivers, the Ilissos and Eridanos, are little more than trickling streams during the hot summer months. Because private wells often yield brackish, salty water unsuitable for drinking, the city relies heavily on public fountain houses fed by impressive terracotta aqueducts, piping fresh spring water down from the surrounding mountains. You follow a path toward the Eniakrounos, the famous 9-spouted fountain, located at the edge of the agora. The fountain house is a cool, shadowed stone structure where water pours continuously through bronze spouts, shaped like roaring lions' heads into large stone basins. Here, a steady stream of enslaved women and lower-class Athenian women gather, carrying large, two-handled clay water jars known as hydriae. The atmosphere around the fountain house is lively and vocal. It is one of the few public spaces where women can gather and exchange news. You watch as a young woman balances a heavy ceramic jar effortlessly on a cushioned ring atop her head. She fills her jar, splashing cool water over her wrists to cool herself down, while chatting with a neighbour about the rising price of barley meal and the upcoming religious festival of the Dipolieia. Water is carried back to homes for cooking, drinking and basic washing. Because every drop must be hauled by hand, conservation is second nature to every Athenian. Food production is another constant challenge. The soil of Attica is rocky, dry and poor for growing wheat, the prized staple of the ancient Mediterranean diet. To prevent starvation, Athens depends entirely on its maritime trade empire. Massive merchant ships sail from the Black Sea region, Egypt and Sicily, bringing thousands of tons of grain into the busy port of Piraeus every season. Because of this crucial reliance on imports, grain trading is one of the most strictly regulated activities in the city. Public inspectors known as sitophilakes roam the agora daily, measuring grain baskets with official bronze weights to ensure merchants do not cheat buyers or artificially inflate prices during times of scarcity. If grain is the body's fuel, olive oil is the fluid that keeps Athenian civilization running. It is used for everything, as the primary cooking fat, as a base for perfumes and medicines, as fuel for small ceramic oil lamps that illuminate dark indoor rooms, and as a body cleanser in the gymnasiums. The olive tree is considered a sacred gift directly from the goddess Athena herself, who according to legend beat Poseidon in a contest for the city by striking the Acropolis rock and producing the very first olive tree. Punishment for cutting down a sacred olive tree in Attica is severe, historically resulting in exile or even death. As you step away from the fountain house, you pass a small artisan workshop built into the side of a mud brick home. Inside, a potter sits at a foot-spun wooden wheel, his hands covered in wet, glistening red clay. He is shaping a crater, a large, wide-mouthed bowl used for mixing wine and water at evening banquets. Beside him, an assistant uses a fine brush made of animal hair to paint intricate black figures onto a previously dried vessel, scenes of Heracles fighting the Nemean lion and warriors donning armour for battle. The pottery of Athens, celebrated worldwide for its famous red figure and black figure styles, is exported across the entire Mediterranean, from the palaces of Etruscan kings in Italy to royal tombs in Persia. Yet here, inside the workshop, the environment is hot, dark, and filled with smoke from the massive brick kiln roaring in the backyard. The potter works long, grueling hours, his lungs breathing in clay dust and charcoal soot day after day. In Athens, physical labour is respected for its craftsmanship, yet aristocrats often look down upon banousoi, manual artisans, believing that long hours of physical labour cramp the body and leave no leisure time for political or civic duty. This tension between aristocratic leisure and working-class survival is woven into every aspect of Athenian life. Nearly half the population living in Attica possesses no political rights whatsoever. The vibrant democracy operating in the Agora is an exclusive club reserved only for free, adult, male citizens born of Athenian parents. As you walk through the crowded square, you pass women walking quietly, heavily veiled to avoid the gazes of unrelated men, metics working tirelessly in their shops while paying a special tax, metowikion, for the privilege of residing in the city without voting rights, and thousands of enslaved people whose labour makes the golden age of architecture, philosophy and politics physically possible. Yet despite these stark inequalities, the energy of Athens is infectious. There is an unmistakable electric pulse in the air, a feeling that you are standing at the absolute centre of the known world, where ideas are tested, art is redefined, and human destiny is being actively carved out of stone. By midday, the Mediterranean sun reaches its zenith directly overhead. The intense heat settles heavy and golden over the plain of Attica. The brilliant white marble of the temples glows with an almost blinding intensity, casting razor-sharp black shadows along the limestone steps. Suddenly, a loud, clear bronze horn blasts across the agora, its deep vibration echoing off the surrounding cliffs. Citizens stop their conversations. Market merchants quickly hand over management of their stalls to assistants or enslaved workers. It is the day of the Ecclesia, the general assembly of all Athenian citizens. A group of Scythian archers, public police officers employed by the city, recognisable by their pointed caps and colourful trousers, move through the market holding a thick rope dipped in wet red dye. They gently sweep the crowd toward the western exit of the agora, using the dyed rope to herd citizens toward the meeting place. Anyone marked with red dye on their clothes will lose their daily attendance stipend. You join the stream of thousands of men walking up the gentle, winding rocky slope toward the Nix, a massive open-air stone theatre set into a hill just west of the Acropolis. As you ascend the path, the city unfolds beneath you like an intricate mosaic of terracotta tile roofs, green olive groves, and whitewashed courtyards, stretching all the way to the sparkling blue expanse of the Saronic Gulf in the distance. You reach the top of the Nix and take a seat on the hard, sun-warmed limestone benches carved directly out of the bedrock. Around you, 6,000 Athenian citizens sit shoulder to shoulder under the open sky. There are wealthy landowners wearing fine, bleached linen hymatians, alongside humble cobblers, stonecutters, sailors, and rural farmers with sun-browned faces and rough hands. Here, on this rocky hill, every citizen's vote carries equal weight, whether he is the wealthiest general or the poorest harbour worker. At the front of the semicircular seating area stands the bema, a raised stone platform carved out of the solid rock. A herald steps forward into the centre of the assembly area. He slaughters a small pig as an offering to purify the space, sprinkling its blood around the perimeter. He then utters a traditional prayer calling upon the gods to protect Athens and curse anyone who seeks to deceive the citizens. The herald's powerful voice echoes across the quieted crowd. "'Tis Agoriouin Bulatai, who wishes to speak." A tall man in his early 50s wearing an elegant cloak steps up onto the stone bema. A hush falls over the 6,000 gathered men. It is Pericles. His posture is calm, dignified, and commanding. He places a wreath of myrtle upon his head, the traditional symbol indicating that a speaker is under sacred protection while addressing the assembly. Pericles begins to speak. His voice is smooth, persuasive, and deeply resonant, carrying easily in the crisp, dry air. He does not use dramatic hand gestures or wild emotional appeals. Instead, he appeals directly to Athenian pride, reason, and strategic vision. The issue before the assembly today is critical: whether to allocate public funds from the Delian League treasury to build a new fleet of trireme warships, or to continue expanding the glorious architectural program on the Acropolis. Athens, Pericles declares, his eyes scanning the sea of listeners, does not copy the laws of neighbouring states. We are an example to others, rather than an imitation. Our constitution is called a democracy because power rests not in the hands of a minority but of the whole people. He lays out the strategic realities clearly. He explains how naval power protects the grain trade routes from the Black Sea, ensuring that no enemy siege can starve the city. He paints a vision of an Athens that is both an invincible maritime empire and the intellectual school of Hellas. As he finishes his speech, loud murmurs of approval ripple through the crowd like wind through a wheat field. Other speakers follow, some passionate, some angry, arguing fiercely against spending public wealth on ships when rural border forts need repair. The debate is fierce, sharp, and unfiltered. Finally, the herald calls for a vote. In Athens, there are no paper ballots for assembly votes. The herald calls out, "All those in favour, raise your hands." A forest of thousands of sun-tanned arms shoots into the air simultaneously. The presiding officers quickly estimate the majority by scanning the crowd. The motion passes, the decision is made, the democracy has spoken. Sitting on that warm limestone bench, watching 6,000 men collectively shape the destiny of their empire, through a simple show of hands, you feel the raw, unmatched power of direct democracy. It is chaotic, imperfect, and susceptible to demagogues. Yet, it is alive in a way no government has ever been before. As the assembly on the Nix reaches its dramatic conclusion, the intense glare of the midday sun begins to soften into a rich, honeyed gold. The 6,000 citizens begin to disperse, their sandals kicking up fine plumes of white limestone dust that drift lazily through the dry afternoon air. Some men return to the bustling shops of the Agora, while others linger on the rocky slope of the hill, continuing the debate in heated, energetic pairs. You stand up, feeling the warm stone of the Nix beneath your hands, and slowly stretch your limbs. The breeze blowing across the ridge carries the crisp scent of pine resin and the sharp, salty tang of the sea from the harbour. Your journey through classical Athens is far from over. Leaving the political heights of the Nix behind, you make your way down toward the western edge of the city wall, where the daily bustle of civic life gives way to the solemn, quiet beauty of the Athenian spirit. You descend into the lower district, turning toward the northwest. The air here shifts dramatically. The grand open spaces of the Agora and the majestic marble vistas of the Acropolis fade into the background, replaced by the dense working-class neighbourhood of the Kerameikos, the Potter's Quarter. It is from this single, busy district that the word ceramic enters the human vocabulary. As you walk through the narrow, twisting alleyways, the atmosphere is heavy with the pungent smoke of brushwood and pine logs burning in high-heat kilns. The ambient sound here is not the eloquent rhetoric of politicians, but the rhythmic creak-whir of kick wheels, the splash of liquid clay slurry, and the clinking of finished terracotta vessels being stacked for transport. Every few yards, open-fronted workshops reveal rows of artisans working with intense focus. You pause outside one large atelier. Inside, young apprentices, many of them young boys or enslaved workers, knead massive mounds of dense, iron-rich Attican clay, working out air bubbles that could cause a pot to explode inside the kiln. At the centre of the room, a master painter sits with a tiny brush, carefully applying a glossy clay slip to a large, elegant water jar, hydria. He works with astonishing precision, outlining the muscular calves of a runner, the delicate folds of a goddess's dress, or the fierce gaze of a hoplite warrior. The master painter does not use stencils or guidelines. Decades of muscle memory guide his hand. Once fired in the carefully controlled, oxygen-starved atmosphere of the kiln, this dull grey slip will turn a deep, lustrous, mirror-like black, while the unpainted clay will fire to a brilliant, warm orange red. This is the birthplace of the world-famous Athenian red figure pottery. These pots are not decorative museum pieces to the people walking past you. They are the plastic containers, wine glasses, storage trunks, and olive oil drums of the ancient world. You continue walking along the main street of the district until you reach the massive, imposing city walls of Athens. Built rapidly out of fieldstones, clay bricks, and reused grave monuments after the Persian invasion, these stone ramparts represent the physical shield of the Republic. At the edge of the Kerameikos stands the most famous gate in the ancient world, the Dipylon Gate. The Dipylon, literally the double gate, is a massive fortified complex featuring two sets of heavy oak doors reinforced with iron bands, set between two giant square stone watchtowers. It serves as the primary entrance to Athens, accommodating the heavy commercial traffic arriving from the countryside, as well as grand religious processions. Step through the shadowed, cool stone portal of the inner gate into the courtyard between the towers. Scythian guards lounge in the shade, their long bows unstrung, watching the steady stream of travellers with lazy vigilance. As you pass through the outer gate, the city walls fall behind you, and the noise of the industrial district drops away into a sudden, profound tranquillity. You are now standing in the Street of Tombs, the principal cemetery of ancient Athens. In Greek culture, the dead are not buried inside the city walls for reasons of both religious purity, miasma, and public health. Instead, they line the major roads leading out of the city, ensuring that the living interact with their memory every single day. Walk along the broad, unpaved avenue. On either side, dramatic funeral monuments rise from stone terraces, high marble slabs known as stelae, sculpted in high relief by master stonecutters. Unlike modern gravestones, which are often cold and austere, these Athenian monuments depict scenes of quiet, heartbreaking intimacy. You stop before one freshly carved marble relief. It depicts a young woman, Hegeso, seated in an elegant chair, her feet resting on a small stool. She wears a soft, flowing tunic, her hair bound in an intricate hairnet. Beside her stands a young female servant, holding open a small wooden jewellery box. Hegeso holds up a delicate ring, looking down at it with a gentle, timeless expression of contemplation. There are no terrifying monsters, no dramatic depictions of death or torment. Instead, Athenian grave monuments capture the quiet beauty of ordinary life. A last touch between a husband and wife, a young boy playing with his pet dog, a soldier holding his helmet. At the base of the monument sit several small ceramic flasks called lekithoi, painted with white slip and filled with precious scented olive oil, offerings left by weeping family members earlier that morning. A gentle breeze rustles the silvery leaves of the olive trees shading the cemetery path. The air smells of sweet pine, dry grass, and wild thyme. Standing among these silent marble figures, you are reminded that despite their grand political experiments and military ambitions, the ancient Athenians were people who loved, grieved, and sought to preserve the simple beauty of human connection against the oblivion of time. Leaving the quiet marble avenue of the Kerameikos behind, you step onto the sacred way, Hera Odos. This ancient, worn road winds west across the plain of Attica, stretching 14 miles to the sanctuary town of Eleusis, the home of the mysterious and deeply revered Eleusinian mysteries. While you do not walk the entire 14 miles today, following the road for a short distance leads you toward another pillar of Athenian male life, the Academy, one of the city's grand public gymnasiums. In classical Athens, a gymnasium is not merely a place to lift weights or sweat off calories. It is a sacred, multifunctional cultural institution combining physical education, military training, philosophical instruction, and social life. You walk along the dirt path beneath the cooling shade of tall plane trees and poplars planted along the banks of the Cephissus River. The dry afternoon heat is tempered here by the thick canopy of leaves and the soft, refreshing sound of running water from irrigation ditches feeding nearby olive groves. After a short walk, the grand enclosure of the gymnasium comes into view. The complex consists of a broad, open-air athletic field, dromos, surrounded by covered colonnades, changing rooms, oiling stations, and lecture halls. As you step into the central courtyard, your ears are met with a lively mix of sound. The rhythmic thud of feet running across hard-packed sand, the heavy impact of wrestlers striking the dirt, and the clear, musical sound of a bronze flute playing a rhythmic tempo for javelin throwers. Look around the sunlit grounds. The first thing you notice is that everyone exercises entirely in the nude. The word gymnasium comes directly from gymnos, the Greek word for naked. In Athenian culture, shedding one's clothes to exercise is a proud marker of Greek identity, setting them apart from surrounding non-Greek cultures, whom they call barbaroi, who consider public nudity disgraceful. Near the edge of the wrestling pit, Palestra, a group of young men in their late teens, members of the Ephibes, the state-mandated military youth corps, are preparing for training. Watch their routine. First, each young man approaches a small bronze amphora filled with olive oil. He pours a pool of golden oil into his palm and rubs it vigorously across his arms, chest, torso, and legs, until his skin glistens like polished bronze in the afternoon light. This layer of oil serves a dual purpose. It protects the skin from the blistering Mediterranean sun and prevents fine dust from clogging pores during intense exercise. The young men step into the wrestling pit, where the ground has been softened using heavy iron picks and sprinkled with fine sand. Two wrestlers squat low, their feet planted firmly in the dirt, their oil-slicked muscles tense and gleaming. They lock foreheads, their hands gripping each other's wrists as they attempt to throw one another to the ground. A grey-bearded trainer, Tribes, dressed in a long cloak stands nearby, holding a long split hazel wand. When a wrestler uses an illegal move or improper form, the trainer sharply strikes the offending limb with his wand, the quick crack echoing across the pit. A short distance away, under the shaded portico, a very different kind of training is taking place. Here, seated on stone benches under the shade of the colonnade, a small group of older men and young aristocrats are gathered around a philosopher. The athletic fields are as much places of the mind as they are of the body. An Athenian ideal, kolokagathia, demands the harmonious balance of a beautiful athletic body, kalos, and a virtuous educated mind, agathos. To train the body while neglecting the intellect is considered barbarian. To cultivate the mind while letting the physical body wither is considered lazy and un-Athenian. You lean against a fluted marble column, breathing in the rich, unique scent of the gymnasium, a mixture of rich olive oil, dry earth, crushed pine needles, and human sweat. The low, soothing sound of the philosopher's voice blends with the soft rustle of plane tree leaves overhead. In this tranquil, shaded sanctuary away from the crowded market, you glimpse the true secret of Athenian intellectual life, the luxury of unhurried time, shoal, dedicated entirely to self-improvement, physical grace, and the pursuit of truth. While the men of Athens spend their afternoons debating on the Knicks, trading in the agora, or wrestling in the sunlit gymnasiums, half of the city's free population lives a radically different, far more insular life. To understand classical Athens fully, you must leave the public spaces behind and return once more to the quiet mud brick interior of the private home, specifically to the gynoeceum. In Athenian law and custom, a respectable female citizen is expected to live a life of profound modesty and domestic privacy. The ideal Athenian woman, as Pericles famously declared in his funeral oration, is one who is least talked about among men, whether for praise or for blame. Her world is centred not on the public assembly or the theatre, but on the management of the oikos, the household estate. Step quietly across the stone courtyard of a middle-class Athenian home. You climb a narrow wooden staircase leading to the upper floor, or pass through a heavy curtained doorway into the rear wing of the ground level. This is the gynoeceum, the women's quarters. It is the most secure, private part of the house, deliberately situated far from the front door to shield the women of the family from the eyes of male visitors or strangers entering from the street. The air inside the rooms is cool and dimly lit, carrying the sweet, comforting scents of dried lavender, rosewater, wool, and burning incense. Sunlight streams in through high, narrow windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Here, away from the male-dominated public sphere, the women of the family, the wife, Jain, her young children, unmarried daughters, and domestic enslaved women create their own rich, self-contained community. At the centre of the largest room sits the mistress of the house, on an elegant curved wooden chair known as a klysmos. She wears a long, finely woven tunic, peplos, of soft cream-coloured wool secured at her waist with a patterned sash. Her hair is braided and bound up in an intricate bun at the back of her head. On her lap sits a small bronze mirror, polished to a high sheen, alongside a terracotta cosmetics jar, pyxis, containing fine white powder made from crushed lead and ground alkanet root used to give a soft, rosy tint to the cheeks. In Athenian society, pale skin is a cherished mark of high status and domestic virtue. It proves that a woman is wealthy and respected enough to manage her household from within, shielded from the harsh, darkening sun that tans the skin of lower-class female labourers, peasant market women, and enslaved workers. Around her, the room is a beehive of skilled textile production. 2 young enslaved women sit on low wooden stools, using bronze carding combs to untangle raw, washed sheep's wool into smooth, fluffy rolls. In the corner, the mistress's 14-year-old daughter stands before a massive vertical frame loom leaning against the mud brick wall. The vertical threads, warp, are held taut by heavy stamped terracotta loom weights that click against one another with every pass of the shuttle. The girl moves her hands with practiced agility, weaving dyed purple and saffron threads into complex geometric patterns along the border of a new cloak for her father. Every piece of fabric used in the home, from the coarse blankets on the beds to the finest ceremonial tunics worn at religious festivals, is created entirely by hand right here in the Gymnasium. A woman's skill at the loom is her proudest domestic achievement, celebrated in poetry and art. Yet it would be a mistake to view the Athenian woman purely as a passive prisoner. Within the walls of the oikos, she exercises immense practical authority. She is the chief financial officer of the domestic estate. She manages the household budget, oversees the storage and rationing of grain, wine and olive oil, delegates daily chores to domestic servants, and cares for the sick. While her husband is away in the public square, she ensures the survival, stability, and wealth of the family line. Furthermore, there is one supreme arena where Athenian women step out of the shadows into profound public prominence: religion. Athenian civic religion is entirely dependent on women. As priestesses of major state cults, most notably the priestess of Athena Polias, women hold positions of immense prestige, political influence, and public honour. Throughout the year, great religious festivals like the Thesmophoria allow women to leave their homes en masse, gathering at sacred sanctuaries for days at a time to perform secret rituals ensuring the fertility of the crops and the safety of the state, rituals from which all men are strictly, legally excluded. As the late afternoon sun casts long, soft shadows across the Gymnasium, the mistress sets down her spinning spindle and smiles warmly at her young son playing on the floor with a tiny wooden horse on wheels. In this quiet, gentle domestic sanctuary, shielded from the fierce political battles of the assembly and the hot dust of the agora, the fundamental foundation of Athenian life is quietly nurtured and sustained. While the domestic world of the city reposes in afternoon quiet, 5 miles to the southwest, connected to Athens by 2 massive fortified stone walls known as the Long Walls, lies a world of terrifying energy, industrial scale, and global commerce, the harbour city of Piraeus. If Athens is the brain and soul of the empire, Piraeus is its lungs, stomach, and muscle. To walk down the wide, straight grid-patterned streets of Piraeus, designed by the visionary town planner Hippodamus of Miletus, is to experience the raw, cosmopolitan power of a true ancient superpower. You walk down toward the great natural harbour of Zeus, one of 3 enclosed bays that make up the port complex. The air here smells sharply of salt water, wet hemp rope, timber pitch, dead sea life, and the exotic spices of 3 continents. The horizon is a dense forest of wooden masts, towering riggings, and snapping canvas sails. Here, hundreds of merchant ships from across the Mediterranean world lie anchored side by side, deep-hulled grain freighters from Egypt and the Black Sea, cedar-laden cargo vessels from Phoenicia, wine transports from Chios, and Etruscan merchant craft carrying iron ore from Italy. Along the stone docks, thousands of dock workers, nautai, foreign merchants, metics, and imperial customs officials create a deafening roar of international commerce. Listen to the babble of languages filling the air: Egyptian, Phoenician, Lydian, Thracian, and dozens of regional Greek dialects, heavy sacks of Egyptian wheat, amphorae of sweet Sicilian wine, blocks of Spanish tin, African ivory, Persian carpets, and Syrian perfumes are hauled up wooden gangplanks by sweating porters, their muscles straining under the afternoon sun. In the vast covered exchange building, the Degma, merchants display small samples of their goods on wooden tables for wholesale buyers. Here, an Athenian citizen can buy virtually any luxury item known to the ancient world. As Pericles proudly boasted, the magnitude of our city draws the produce of the world into our harbour, so that to the Athenian the fruits of other countries are as familiar a luxury as those of his own. You walk along the curving stone quay toward the military harbour of Cantharos. Here, shielded inside giant stone slipways topped with tiled roofs, sit the true iron fists of Athenian power, the triremes. The trireme is the absolute pinnacle of ancient naval engineering. A sleek, lethal, wood-built warship, roughly 120 feet long and barely 18 feet wide, powered by 170 oarsmen, arranged in 3 vertical tiers along each side. You stand beside one of these magnificent sea monsters as it rests in its dry dock. The hull is painted with thick black pine pitch for waterproofing, with giant, terrifying eyes, ophthalmoi, painted in vivid red and white paint on either side of the bow to help the ship see its path through the waves. At the very front, projecting forward at water level, sits a massive 4-bladed ram sheathed in solid bronze. Inside the slipway, shipwrights and carpenters are hard at work. The sound of caulking iron striking oak timbers echoes under the high wooden rafters. They are fitting new oars made of lightweight fur and soaking heavy hemp ropes in sea oil to preserve them against rot. Near the stern of the ship, a group of young Athenian citizens, poorer men of the Thete class who form the elite rowing force of the navy, are practicing their stroke cadence on wooden training benches set up along the quay. Unlike other ancient powers that rely on enslaved workers to row their warships, the Athenian navy is powered entirely by free citizens and paid foreign resident workers. Rowing a trireme is considered a sacred civic duty and a point of immense democratic pride. It is these 170 men, pulling in absolute unison to the rhythmic tune of a bronze flute player, or leets, who turn this lightweight wooden vessel into a guided missile capable of slicing through the water at 9 knots and smashing enemy warships to splinters with its bronze ram. As you look out across the bustling harbour, where dozens of warships manoeuvre in formation out in the bay, while merchant ships unload their international treasures along the quays, you realise that the democracy of the Knicks and the philosophy of the Agora would not exist for a single week without the wooden walls and bronze rams of Piraeus. It is here, where the salt spray hits the stone docks, that the destiny of the Western world is secured by sea power. The deep crimson rays of the setting Mediterranean sun begin to kiss the marble columns of the Parthenon high above. The fierce heat of the day recedes, giving way to a cool, refreshing evening breeze that carries the scent of mountain sage, roasted lamb, and sweet pine resin across the rooftops. As the shadows lengthen across the narrow cobblestone alleys, the public life of Athens gently closes its doors. The blacksmiths extinguish their hearths, the potters lay down their brushes in the Kerameikos, and the Scythian archers walk their final patrols around the quieted market square. Night falls quickly in the south. The pale light of the stars begins to pierce the indigo twilight. Now, as the stars emerge, you prepare to step into the most exclusive, intellectual, and legendary social ritual of classical Athens, the symposium. The symposium is not merely a dinner party. It is a sacred, highly structured social institution reserved exclusively for free adult male citizens. It is an evening dedicated to wine, music, philosophical debate, politics, poetry, and sensual delight. You walk through the dark streets of the city, illuminated only by the faint flickering light of a small terracotta oil lamp held by an enslaved boy leading your path. You arrive at the outer wooden door of an elegant Athenian townhouse owned by a wealthy citizen named Callias. The slave knocks twice with a heavy bronze ring. The wooden bolt slides back, and you are warmly welcomed into the dimly lit, whitewashed courtyard. Before entering the banquet hall, you're led to a small washing station. An enslaved servant kneels before you with a bronze pitcher of warm water, gently washing the road dust from your feet and hands. He lightly rubs your hands with sweet-smelling almond oil and places a freshly woven garland of dark green ivy and fragrant violet blossoms upon your head. Now properly purified, you step across the threshold into the andron, the men's dining room. The andron is designed specifically for intimacy and conversation. It is a square room with a raised stone border around the edges of the floor, deliberately set off-centre so that the entrance door does not disrupt the seating arrangement. Arranged along the walls are 7 or 9 wooden couches, clean-eye, elegantly carved from walnut wood, inlaid with ivory, and covered with thick woolen cushions, sheepskins, and rich purple-dyed woven blankets. In an Athenian symposium, no one sits upright to eat or drink. Guests lie down on their left sides, resting their left elbows on comfortable cushions, leaving their right arms free to hold wine cups, select food, or gesture during dynamic conversations. You take your assigned place upon one of the couches. Beside you lies another guest, a middle-aged playwright dressed in a fine, crisp white linen tunic. In the centre of the room, on small low wooden tables set before each couch, the preliminary meal, deep non, is served. Enslaved servants bring out wooden platters loaded with roasted lamb, sprinkled with sea salt and oregano, grilled sea bass wrapped in fig leaves, bowls of sweet honeyed figs, walnuts, dried grapes, and loaves of fine white wheat bread. The food is eaten entirely with fingers, as forks and spoons are unknown for such meals. Pieces of soft bread crusts are used as napkins to wipe olive oil and juices from your fingers, before being tossed onto the floor for the household dogs. The meal is eaten in relative quiet and efficiency. In the mind of an Athenian, the food is merely a necessary prelude. The true main event begins only after the dinner tables are cleared away. Once the food platters are removed and the floor is swept clean, small terracotta altars are brought into the centre of the room. A few drops of unmixed wine are poured onto the floor as a libation to the Agathos daimon, the good spirit, to the Olympian gods, and to the hero founders of the city. A solemn hymn, Paean, is sung in unison by all the guests, their voices blending in smooth harmony under the wooden ceiling beams. Now, the central ritual of the evening begins, the mixing of the wine. To the ancient Greeks, drinking unmixed wine, akratos, is considered the mark of a violent, uncultured barbarian. Unmixed wine is seen as too potent, capable of inflaming wild tempers and clouding human reason. A civilized Greek must mix his wine with fresh water. In the centre of the room sits a magnificent, wide-mouthed ceramic vessel, a crater, decorated with exquisite black and red figures depicting Dionysus, the god of wine and theatre. An enslaved servant fills the vessel with water drawn from a cool well, then adds dark, concentrated, resinous wine in a precise ratio. Tonight, the host chooses a moderate ratio, 3 parts water to 1 part wine. The guests now elect a symposiarch, the ruler of the feast. This elected guest is responsible for determining the strength of the wine mixture, deciding how many rounds of drinks will be poured, setting the topics of discussion, and ensuring that no guest becomes dangerously belligerent or remains overly sober. The symposiarch raises his shallow silver drinking cup, kylix, and sets the rule for the night. Tonight, my friends, we drink not to drown our minds in stupor, but to loosen the knots of caution, to ignite the spark of intellect, and to let truth speak without fear. Enslaved boys use bronze ladles, kiathoi, to transfer the mixed wine from the great central crater into wide, shallow, two-handled drinking cups called Kerameikos. You take your cup by its delicate stem, feeling the smooth, cool ceramic. As you tip the shallow bowl to drink, a playful artistic trick reveals itself. Inside the bottom of the cup, painted in fine black slip, is the face of a grinning gorgon, or a humorous satire scene that becomes visible only as you drain the wine. The wine tastes rich, complex, and distinct. It is not like modern wine. It is infused with pine resin to preserve it, sweet honey, and subtle spices like cinnamon and mint. It warms your chest instantly, melting away the fatigue of the long day. As the wine cups are refilled, the room comes alive with entertainment, intellectual competition, and shared joy. In one corner of the room, two guests are playing Kotobos, the most popular party game of the classical world. A guest balances his shallow kylix by inserting an index finger through one of its handles. He swirls the last dregs of wine in the bottom of the cup, takes aim, and flickers his wrist with practiced skill, launching the droplets of wine across the room toward a tiny bronze disc balanced precariously atop a tall metal stand, Kotobos stand. With a satisfying bronze clink, the disc falls, splashing into a basin below to the loud cheers and laughter of the gathered guests. Soon the symposiarch clap his hands, calling the room to order for intellectual entertainment. A young female musician enters the room. She is a hetaira, a highly educated, independent foreign woman who serves as an intellectual companion, artist, and entertainer at male banquets, possessing a freedom of movement denied to citizen wives. She holds an elegant seven-stringed tortoiseshell lyre. Her fingers pluck the gut strings with masterly skill, producing soft, hauntingly beautiful modal melodies that float through the warm air. She sings lines from the ancient poets Sappho, Alcaeus, and Pindar, songs of passionate love, heroic battles, and the fleeting nature of human youth. When the music ends, the topic of discussion chosen by the symposiarch begins. Tonight, the topic is, what is the nature of true courage? The debate moves sequentially from couch to couch around the room. The playwright argues that courage is the ability to endure suffering with dignity. A veteran hoplite soldier counters that courage is standing firm in the battle line beside your comrade when your heart commands you to run. A young philosopher argues that true courage is the intellectual strength to question one's own deepest beliefs in the pursuit of truth. You listen spellbound, sipping your wine as the arguments clash, refine, and harmonise. There are no raised tempers or bitter insults here. The shared rules of the symposium transform disagreement into an elegant dance of minds. Look around the room in the warm, flickering oil lamp light. You see faces illuminated by laughter, intellect, and wine. Eyes sparkling with sudden insight, hands gesturing dynamically, heads crowned with violet garlands reclining against purple velvet cushions. This is the true secret of Athenian cultural genius. In this sacred space of the andron, the raw energy of human desire and the refined power of human intellect are merged into a single, breathtaking harmony. By midnight, the symposium reaches its natural conclusion. The great central crater is empty. The oil lamps flicker low, their wicks burning down into warm olive oil, casting long, soft shadows across the stone floor strewn with dropped flower petals and breadcrumbs. Guests step out into the cool, dark courtyard, saying their warm, affectionate farewells to the host. Some guests form a lively singing street procession, a komos, walking through the dark city streets with torches, playing flutes and laughing as they make their way back to their homes. You walk away from the house alone, stepping out into the absolute quiet of the Athenian night. The city is completely asleep now. The narrow, unpaved alleys are dark, silent, and cool. There are no street lamps, no distant sounds of engines, only the soft, steady rhythm of your leather sandals against the dusty stones and the gentle chirping of crickets hiding in the crevices of mud brick walls. You walk up the winding rocky path leading toward the base of the Acropolis. You stand upon a high stone outcrop overlooking the entire sleeping city. Below you, thousands of terracotta-tiled roofs rest under the brilliant blanket of the Mediterranean night sky. The Milky Way stretches across the black heavens like a river of silver dust. Look up at the summit of the sacred rock. Bathed in the cool, silvery light of the full moon, the Parthenon stands silently against the stars. Its massive marble columns cast sharp, dark shadows across the stone terrace. High above the temple, the colossal bronze tip of Athena's spear catches the pale moonlight, gleaming like a gentle, eternal lighthouse guarding the Republic. Standing here in the quiet night air, taking a deep, slow breath of pine-scented wind blowing off the mountains, you feel the vast, extraordinary weight of what you have experienced. You have walked the narrow mud-brick alleys smelling of charcoal and sourdough. You have listened to the unyielding, relentless questions of Socrates under the shaded columns of the Stoa. You have felt the raw power of thousands of hands raised together on the sun-baked rocks of the Pnyx. You have heard the tragic grief carved into the quiet marble of the Kerameikos, felt the thundering maritime power of the warships at Piraeus, and listened to the sublime poetry echoed across the wine cups of the symposium. This was classical Athens, a world of stark contradictions, fierce passions, tragic flaws, and soaring intellectual achievements. It was a city brief in its golden age, fragile in its existence, yet immortal in its impact on the human spirit. As the night breeze gently wraps around your cloak, you close your eyes, holding the warm, enduring memory of this ancient world in your heart, as the timeless city slumbers quietly under the silver light of the eternal stars. The silver glow of the moon slowly yields to a pale, pearlescent lavender, creeping over the jagged crest of Mount Hymettus. The night insects fall silent. A cool, crisp morning breeze sweeps down from the northern hills, carrying the sharp, awakening scent of damp earth, wild mint, and roasting firewood. You open your eyes to the new dawn, feeling the rough texture of the wool blanket draped over your shoulders. The symposium has ended, the wine cups have been washed, and the sleeping city is beginning to stir once more. In classical Athens, life does not pause for long. While the philosophers and politicians rest after their evening debates, the true foundation of the Athenian economy, the rural countryside of Attica, is already awake and hard at work. Today, you step beyond the urban walls and venture out into the fertile plains and rugged hills that sustain the entire civilization. You leave the city through the Melitian Gate, walking southward along the dirt tracks that lead away from the urban centre and out into the rural countryside known as the Mesogeia, the inland plain lying between the mountains of Parnes, Pentelicus, and Hymettus. The landscape here is an ancient, sun-baked patchwork of agriculture. Unlike the vast, flat, grain-producing estates of Egypt or Mesopotamia, the geography of Attica is fragmented, rocky, and unforgiving. The soil is thin and dry, requiring back-breaking labour to coax a harvest from the earth. Yet, under the golden Mediterranean sun, this landscape thrives through the careful, multi-generational stewardship of the Athenian smallholder farmer, the typical hoplite citizen who forms the military and economic backbone of the state. As you walk past dry stone terrace walls built to prevent soil erosion on the gentle hillsides, you see a small rural farmstead, oikos. It consists of a modest single-storey mud brick farmhouse surrounded by a courtyard, a stone-lined freshwater cistern, and a small barn housing a pair of patient oxen. In the adjacent field, a farmer and his grown son are already at work. They wear short, coarse tunics made of heavy dark wool, their skin deeply bronzed by decades of relentless exposure to the summer sun and winter winds. The father guides a simple wooden plough tipped with an iron point, IRD, pulled by the slow-moving oxen. The plough does not turn the deep soil like modern mechanical blades. Instead, it merely scratches a shallow furrow into the hard-packed earth, preparing it for the autumn sowing of barley. Walk closer to the edge of the olive grove bordering the property. The olive trees here are ancient, gnarled and twisted into grotesque, beautiful shapes, their silvery green leaves shimmering softly in the morning light. Some of these trunks are so thick that 3 men could hardly wrap their arms around them. They are living testaments to generations of families who have worked this exact soil. In the corner of the orchard, a basket rests on the ground, filled with dark, meaty olives harvested by hand from the lower branches. Beside the orchard sits the vineyard. The grapevines are pruned low to the ground in neat, orderly rows, their thick, woody stems bursting with swelling green and purple clusters that will soon be harvested for the autumn vintage. The rural farmer does not live in isolation from the political drama of the city. In Athens, a man is both a cultivator of the soil and a citizen soldier. When the herald's horn sounds on the Nix or war threatens the borders, this very farmer will leave his plough in the furrow, walk into the city, strap a 60-pound bronze breastplate to his chest, pick up his heavy wooden shield, hoplon, and take his place in the battle line shoulder to shoulder with his fellow citizens. The strength of Athenian democracy is rooted directly in these calloused hands and sun-baked fields. Continuing your walk through the rolling hills of Attica, you follow a narrow dirt track winding through a fragrant pine forest. The air is cool and filled with the crisp scent of resin and wild heather. Suddenly, the path opens into a quiet, sunlit clearing shaded by an immense ancient oak tree. At the base of the tree stands a rustic stone altar, its surface blackened and polished smooth by centuries of sacrificial smoke and oil libations. This is a rural sanctuary, one of hundreds scattered across the countryside of Attica, dedicated to local divinities, nymphs, and Pan, the god of the wild hills and pastures. There are no grand marble columns or monumental friezes here. The sacred space is marked simply by low stone boundary markers, horoi, and terracotta votive figurines left behind by grateful worshippers, small clay models of sheep, goats, miniature ploughshares, and tiny painted legs or arms left by those praying for healing. Pause for a moment in the deep, calming silence of the clearing. Listen to the wind rustling through the oak leaves, the distant bubbling of a hidden spring, and the faint, sweet sound of a shepherd's panpipe echoing across the valley. In the ancient Greek mind, the natural world is not a dead, mechanical resource to be exploited. It is a living, breathing realm filled with divine presence. Every spring has its naiad, every grove its dryad, every mountain its Pan. To walk through the Attic countryside is to move through a sacred landscape where the human world and the divine world are constantly touching, whispering and interweaving. A short distance away, a young shepherd boy sits upon a flat boulder, watching over a flock of long-haired, curly-wooled sheep that graze contentedly on the dry grass. He wears a rough woolen pelt over his shoulders and holds a wooden crook in his hand. Beside him sits a shaggy, alert sheepdog that looks up at you with intelligent, cautious eyes. The boy is whittling a piece of soft willow wood with a small bronze pocket knife, shaping a new reed flute. He looks up as you pass, offering a warm, silent nod, a timeless gesture of human recognition shared across the millennia between travellers on the ancient road. Turning back toward the city as the morning sun begins to climb into the clear blue sky, you re-enter Athens through the western gates near the foot of the Areopagus, the ancient rocky hill of the Council of Elders. Nestled in the saddle of land between the Acropolis and the Agora lies one of the most mechanically innovative districts of the city, the industrial neighbourhood surrounding the Hephaestion, the magnificent, remarkably well-preserved temple dedicated to Hephaestus, the god of metallurgy and craftsmanship, and Athena Ergain, the patron of artisans. Unlike the pristine marble of the Parthenon above, the Hephaestion is constructed of warm reddish-brown limestone and Pentelic marble, its metopes carved with the labours of Heracles and Theseus. Yet what makes this district truly remarkable is not the temple itself, but the roaring, smoking, high-energy industrial workshops that surround its base. step into the narrow lane beside the temple precinct. The air here is thick with the heavy metallic tang of coal smoke, burning charcoal and sulphur. The sound is an unceasing symphony of heavy industrial labour, the rhythmic clang, clang, clang of iron hammers striking white-hot metal, the hiss of steam as glowing bronze is plunged into cold water troughs, and the heavy roar of foot-operated leather bellows pumping oxygen into subterranean clay furnaces. You peer into the open front of a bronze founder's workshop. The scene inside looks like a medieval forge crossed with an alchemist's laboratory. Several men and enslaved artisans are working together with intense, dangerous focus. They're using the complex lost wax casting method, Sire Perdue, to create a life-size bronze statue destined for a sanctuary dedication. Watch the process unfold before your eyes. An artisan takes a core of clay roughly shaped like a human torso, coats it in a layer of beeswax and meticulously carves the intricate details of muscles, veins and clothing folds into the wax. Next, the wax model is encased in an outer layer of liquid clay and baked in a kiln. The wax melts away, leaving a hollow cavity between the inner and outer clay moulds. Now comes the most critical moment. The master craftsman, his face streaked with soot and sweat, supervises the pouring of molten bronze heated to over 1,000 degrees in a stone furnace. The glowing liquid metal, a blazing mixture of copper and tin, flows through clay channels with a blinding yellow-white light, filling the mould. The heat radiating from the crucible is intense, baking the skin of your face even from several yards away. When the bronze cools and the clay mould is chipped away, a magnificent gleaming metallic figure emerges, rough around the edges, waiting to be chiselled, polished, and inlaid with copper lips and silver eyes by the master's delicate hands. This is the material reality behind the golden age of Greek art. Before Phidias sculpted the breathtaking marble statues of the Parthenon, and long before bronze statues filled every square of the Mediterranean world, these smoke-filled, deafening workshops of the Hephaestorian district were the roaring engine room where human imagination was hammered directly into physical eternity. Leaving the smoke of the bronze foundries behind, you walk eastward across the city, passing the eastern slope of the Acropolis, and heading out toward the open, grassy meadows beyond the city walls near the river Ilissos. Here stands the Lyceum, another of Athens' great public gymnasiums and philosophical centres sacred to Apollo Lycaos, while the Academy, founded later by Plato, will become famous for abstract mathematical and metaphysical speculation. The Lyceum is a place of empirical observation, natural science, botany, zoology, and geography. As you approach the gymnasium grounds, you notice a network of shaded gravel pathways, peripatoi, winding beneath tall plane trees and laurel groves. Walking slowly along one of these shaded paths is a group of scholars engaged in deep, animated conversation. At their centre walks a man in his 40s with sharp, piercing eyes, neatly trimmed hair, and an intense, inquiring expression. It is Aristotle. He's not standing behind a lectern or lecturing from an elevated platform. Instead, he practices philosophy while walking, earning his students the famous nickname Peripatetics, meaning those who walk about. You step quietly onto the gravel path, falling into step a few paces behind the group, listening to their conversation drift back on the morning breeze. Aristotle is discussing the classification of living organisms. He's explaining how animals can be systematically categorized based on their physical traits, reproductive habits, and anatomical structures. Nature, Aristotle says, gesturing with an open hand toward a flowering bush where bees are gathering pollen, does nothing in vain. Every organ, every instinct, every living form has its purpose and its place within the grand order of the cosmos. He pauses to examine a small insect on a leaf, pulling a small stylus and wax tablet from his belt to quickly scratch down a botanical note before continuing his stroll. Here, in the cool, green meadows of the Lyceum, the foundation of modern scientific inquiry is being forged through observation, classification, and unquenchable curiosity. There are no mystical incantations or dogmatic decrees here, only the rigorous, systematic interrogation of the physical world using human reason and empirical evidence. As the afternoon sun climbs once more toward its zenith, casting a warm golden radiance across the Ilissos riverbed and the green meadows of the Lyceum, you pause beneath the cooling shade of a towering plane tree. You look out over the sprawling, vibrant, chaotic landscape of classical Athens. You see the great white marble crown of the Acropolis gleaming against the deep blue sky. You hear the faint, distant hum of commerce rising from the agora. You sense the tireless rhythm of the potters in the Kerameikos, the farmers in the stony fields of Attica, the rowers in the shipyards of Piraeus, and the philosophers walking beneath the trees. Yet as you stand in this moment of perfect historical clarity, a quiet, melancholic awareness settles over you. You know something that the citizens walking past you do not yet fully comprehend. You know that this breathtaking, brilliant explosion of democracy, art, philosophy, and empire is fragile. You know that within a single generation, this golden age will be shattered by the devastating catastrophe of the Peloponnesian War, crushed by plague, broken by military defeat, and ultimately absorbed into the vast empires of Macedonia and Rome. And yet that realization only makes the reality of what you have witnessed far more magnificent. Athens was never permanent. Its marble was destined to weather, its empire to fall, its walls to crumble into dust. Yet its true achievement was never the stone it carved or the ships it sailed. Its true achievement was the radical, audacious, blindingly bright idea that human beings could govern themselves through debate, test their world through reason, create beauty through art, and question the universe without fear. The afternoon breeze whispers through the olive groves, carrying the sweet scent of dry earth and wild thyme. You take one final deep breath of the Attic air, feeling the ancient sun warm your skin, and let the 25 centuries gently dissolve back into the silence of history, leaving the eternal spirit of Athens burning brightly in your mind. The afternoon sun begins its slow, majestic descent toward the western horizon, casting long, dramatic fingers of indigo shadow across the rocky slopes of the Areopagus and the crowded rooftops of the lower city. The heat of the day softens into a pleasant amber glow that warms the ancient stone blocks of the city walls. You find yourself standing near the Dipylon Gate, where the bustling commercial traffic of the day begins to thin out. Merchants are packing up their wooden display tables, folding canvas awnings, and leading their pack mules back toward the stables for the evening. Yet, even as the physical labour of the day winds down, a different kind of energy begins to stir within the veins of the city. An atmosphere of quiet reflection, artistic anticipation, and the eternal human search for meaning through performance and storytelling. You turn your steps toward the southern slope of the Acropolis, following a well-trodden path that winds past olive groves and stone terraces until you reach the grand sanctuary of Dionysus Eleutherius. Here lies one of the most culturally revolutionary inventions of human history, the Theatre of Dionysus. As you step into the vast open-air amphitheatre carved directly into the bedrock of the sacred hill, the sheer scale of the architecture takes your breath away. Tier upon tier of white limestone stone benches, theatron, rise in a sweeping semicircle, climbing steeply up the hillside. The theatre can seat nearly 17,000 spectators, virtually the entire adult male citizen population of Athens, alongside resident foreigners and honoured guests. At the centre of the lowest tier sit the seats of supreme honour, prohedria, magnificent thrones carved from Pentelic marble, adorned with intricately sculpted lion paw feet and relief carvings of mythical beasts. These seats are reserved for the high priest of Dionysus, city magistrates, generals, and foreign ambassadors. Look closely at the central throne. It bears the inscribed name of the priest of Dionysus, who sits at the very heart of the festival celebrations. Down in the circular performance floor at the bottom, the orchestra, the ground is smooth, hard-packed earth. Behind it stands the skene, a temporary wooden stage building representing a palace, temple, or rustic hut, painted with brilliant murals to set the scene for the day's performance. Imagine what this space is like during the great festival of the city Dionysia in early spring. 17,000 people sit shoulder to shoulder under the open sky, wrapped in coloured cloaks, holding cushions and small baskets of dried figs, honey cakes, and wineskins to sustain them through a marathon day of dramatic competition. There are no microphones, no artificial amplifiers. Yet the acoustic engineering of the Theatre of Dionysus is a marvel of ancient design. A spectator sitting on the very highest row, hundreds of feet up the hillside, can hear a coin dropped on the stone floor of the orchestra, or a whispered line spoken by an actor with startling crystal-clear precision. Today the stone benches are empty and quiet, save for a gentle breeze rustling through the weeds growing between the limestone blocks. Yet, standing here in the silent theatre, you can almost hear the phantom echoes of the great dramatic masterpieces that were first performed on this very ground. The towering tragic agonies of Sophocles' Oedipus Rex, the fierce ethical dilemmas of Aeschylus's Oresteia, and the sharp, biting social satires of Aristophanes. In Athens, theatre is not merely a form of weekend entertainment. It is a civic, religious, and political ritual. The state pays for the admission of poorer citizens through the Theoric Fund, ensuring that no man is too poor to attend. Through tragedy and comedy, the entire city gathers collectively to interrogate its deepest fears, its moral failures, its hubris, and its relationship with the gods. The theatre is the public mirror in which Athens looks at its own soul, questioning what it means to be human, mortal, and free. Leaving the quiet stone tiers of the theatre behind, you walk back through the dimming streets as the sky shifts from gold to a deep, velvety violet. The stars begin to pierce the evening canopy, shining like scattered diamonds above the dark silhouette of the Acropolis. The city around you changes character once again. The bustling noise of the day dissolves into the intimate domestic sounds of the evening. Across the neighbourhoods of Athens, small terracotta oil lamps are ignited inside inner courtyards, casting warm, flickering golden light through narrow doorways and high wooden shutters. You walk past a neighbourhood bakery where an enslaved baker is drawing the last batch of coarse barley loaves from a glowing clay oven, the rich, earthy scent of baked grain drifting out into the cooling night air. Inside the homes, families gather around the central hearth, Hestia. The evening meal, deepnon, is modest. A bowl of warm lentil soup flavoured with garlic and wild coriander, a wedge of goat cheese, a handful of black olives, and a piece of flat barley bread dipped in watered wine. There are no electric lights, no glowing screens, no ticking clocks to rush the evening. Families sit close together in the warm, flickering glow of the oil lamps, sharing stories of the day's events, reciting passages from Homer's Iliad and Odyssey by heart, or listening to the elders recount tales of the glorious victory over the Persian fleet at Salamis. In this quiet, unhurried nocturnal intimacy, the true pulse of Athenian life beats steadily. For all its marble temples, its brilliant philosophers, its sweeping naval empire, and its fierce political assemblies, Athens was ultimately built upon the foundation of the home, the private oikos where human beings sought warmth, security and connection against the vast, indifferent darkness of the ancient world. As the night deepens, you make your way toward the northern edge of the city, climbing a low rocky ridge that offers a sweeping view toward the port of Piraeus. Stretching out across the dark plain below you are the long walls, two parallel massive stone fortifications, nearly 5 miles long, enclosing the broad corridor connecting Athens directly to its harbour. Along the top of the stone ramparts, small bonfires flicker in the darkness. These are the posts of the city watchmen and hoplite guards on night duty, standing vigilant against potential surprise attacks from rival Spartan armies or internal unrest. The fires cast long, dancing orange reflections against the grey stone blocks, guiding the path of the night wind. You stand at the edge of the stone parapet, looking down at the dark corridor between the walls. In the far distance, glowing faintly against the southern horizon, the lights of Piraeus twinkle like fallen stars, where the great merchant ships and war galleys rest quietly in their docks. Behind you, rising up into the star-studded night sky, the white marble columns of the Parthenon gleam with a timeless, ethereal radiance under the pale light of the moon. Take one final deep breath of the cool pine-scented night air. Feel the ancient stone beneath your hands, the rough wool of your cloak against your shoulders, and the quiet stillness of 25 centuries settling gently around you. You have walked the dusty streets, debated on the rocky hills, shared wine in the flickering light of the Andron, and witnessed the breathtaking, fragile heartbeat of the greatest democracy of the ancient world. As the embers of the watchfires slowly fade into glowing red coals, and the deep silence of the Mediterranean night embraces the land, the timeless spirit of Athens remains, an eternal monument to the courage, creativity, and boundless potential of the human mind. The velvet blanket of the Mediterranean night begins to fray at its eastern edges. A thin, pale silver line stretches across the horizon above the distant mountains of Attica, heralding the birth of a brand new day. The crickets fall silent, replaced by the early morning chatter of sparrows nesting in the clay tile eaves of the houses. The air is cool, crisp and heavy, with the clean scent of dew-kissed grass and wild rosemary. You stand once again upon the stone parapet overlooking the long fortified corridor leading down to the sea. As the morning light deepens from silver to pale gold, a low collective murmur begins to rise from the direction of the port of Piraeus, a distant rhythmic sound that rolls up the valley like the incoming tide. It is the sound of bronze-tipped oars striking the sea in absolute synchronized harmony. You descend from the ridge and walk quickly toward the southern approach, following the dirt track that runs parallel to the long walls. The low rumble grows louder, turning into a steady metallic thud and the sharp splash of 100 water-churning blades. Suddenly, rounding the final curve of the fortified channel, the vanguard of an Athenian naval squadron comes into breathtaking view. It is a squadron of 10 triremes returning from a routine patrol across the Saronic Gulf. The ships glide across the deep blue water with terrifying grace and speed. Their black-pitched wooden hulls slice through the waves, and the giant painted eyes on their bows glare fiercely forward in the morning sun. At the stern of the lead ship, the helmsman leans against the massive steering oar with practiced ease, while the flute player stands amidships, softly piping a rhythmic tempo to keep the rowers locked in cadence. Along the stone quays of Piraeus, a crowd of citizens, merchants and sailors has already gathered to watch the fleet dock. As the ships glide smoothly into their slipways, the oars are pulled swiftly inboard in unison, disappearing into the hull like the legs of a giant insect. The crew step out onto the stone docks, their muscles glistening with sweat, laughing and shouting as they hoist their heavy wooden oars onto their shoulders to carry them to the storage sheds. This is the lifeblood of the Athenian Empire made visible. Without these ships, Athens is merely a collection of dusty hills and poor soil. With them, it is the undisputed master of the Aegean, an international superpower that commands the respect and tribute of hundreds of allied cities across the sea. Following the flow of the morning crowd away from the port and back toward the heart of the city, you re-enter the agora just as the sun clears the rooftop of the Stoa Poikile. The market square, which was silent and dark just an hour ago, explodes back into vibrant, chaotic life. Temporary wooden tables are thrown open, and awnings of woven reed are stretched across poles to block the coming heat. The fishmongers are the first to set up, dumping gleaming mounds of fresh silver sardines, red mullets, and massive, freshly caught octopus onto cold marble slabs. Beside them, the bakers unload heavy wooden trays of warm, fragrant barley bread, while vegetable sellers stack pyramids of bright green leeks, purple onions, fresh garlic and crisp cucumbers. Listen to the morning cries ringing out across the square. Fine barley meal, ground this morning at the mill. Honey from Hymettus, golden and sweet as the nectar of the gods. Fresh figs, still wet with the morning dew. Among the stalls, philosophers, merchants, generals and enslaved workers mingle once again. A group of young citizens gathers near the circular base of the eponymous heroes, scanning the newly written white plasterboards for public decrees, court dates, and military appointments. The democratic machine of Athens restarts its gears, humming with the restless, unquenchable energy of a people who believe that they, and they alone, hold the power to shape their own destiny. You walk toward the centre of the bustling agora, stopping near the shaded columns of a marble portico. The morning air warms against your skin, carrying the familiar comforting mixture of roasting wood smoke, crushed olives, sea salt, and human sweat. Around you, the world is in constant, vibrant motion. An old citizen argues passionately about tax policy with a visiting merchant from Miletus. A young boy chases a rolling wooden hoop past a stone fountain house. A philosopher poses a sharp, unanswerable question to a circle of eager students. You close your eyes for a brief moment, listening to the rich tapestry of sounds, the clinking of bronze coins, the chatter of voices in ancient Greek, the distant chanting from a temple on the hillside, and the soft rustle of woolen cloaks brushing against stone. Open your eyes and look across the city one final time. The marble of the Parthenon catches the full, blinding brilliance of the morning sun, blazing like a golden crown against the endless blue of the Attic sky. You have lived their morning, walked their streets, shared their wine, questioned their universe, and witnessed the breathtaking pinnacle of their golden age. Though 25 centuries have passed since these stones were laid, and these voices faded into the silence of the earth, the spirit of Athens remains alive. It lives in every question asked, every debate held, every vote cast, and every search for truth undertaken by the human mind. Take one final, deep, lingering breath of the ancient air. The city is alive, eternal, and waiting for the next dawn.